Okay, we are live here for Music Street Journal's 25th anniversary, and I'm here with Greg Olma, Music Street contributor. Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Hello.
All right, metal, dude. So, I guess why don't we start with just why don't you talk about how you got involved with Music Street Journal in the first place, and sort of how you contribute and that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I have to say the what got me to meet you, and I did a little bit of research on dates and things like that. Um, I would have to give credit to my buddy Mark Ketzlawa. Was friends with him, and I was able to get photo passes for a number of concerts. And he used to write for Pit Magazine and Illinois Entertainer, and he used to do stuff in the Chicagoland area. And so he'd give me the photo pass because he knew photography was kind of my hobby, and I loved taking pictures. So I'd go with him and go to these concerts. Well, it was actually April 21st, 2000 that you and I first met.
I
And
couldn't. What concert was it? I couldn't
that was
remember.
Dio on the Magica tour at the House of Blues.
Oh, that was, and so you probably met Mike Korn that night too, or did you?
I don't remember. I might have.
Because I was there with Mike. We Mike and I actually talked about that concert when we did our chat
Yeah.
last week.
And
Because
that was
that's the
the
night we got
first
to
time I
meet
met
Dio.
you. Yeah, that was the first time I met you.
And now
Yeah.
who was the now settle something? Here's what Mike couldn't remember who all was on the bill. I think it was Doro opening, and then Ingve Malmsteen, and then Dio, right?
That's correct, but I didn't meet you at that time. I met you at the House of Blues. That concert was, I think, in November or
Okay.
something like that, because he came through twice on that. The time
Oh,
I met you was in April on the 21st, and that was when they played Magica with the No Name Band as the opening act.
I don't think that's right because I don't remember seeing Dio more than once. I saw him with Heaven and Hell a couple times, but by himself, I think I only ever saw him once.
And I think, yeah, because I'm almost positive that was the time. Well, maybe I am incorrect, but 2000 definitely is the year, and I remember it was the Magica show,
Okay.
the Magica tour, because I'm trying to think, and I'd have to look through my backstage passes or my photo passes, and because I don't think I shot that night. I did shoot Doro, but I don't think I shot Dio. But anyway, so that was the first time I met you, and we spoke briefly. And you said you were a writer for Music Street Journal. You did photography and reviews, and you had said something like, "Hey, we should get in contact with one another, hook up." And for whatever reason, it never materialized. I probably, it was on me. It was probably my airhead mind probably just let it go. And it wasn't until June 3rd of 2005 where we met again, and we were shooting Judas Priest and Queensryche at the Tinley Park location.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know if it was First Midwest Bank Amphitheater, if it was the World Theater at that time, but it
Yeah.
was Judas Priest. It was on the one where Rob Halford just came back.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Forgot what that one was called, but
An-
it was that Angels of Retribution tour,
Angels of Retribution. Yeah.
and we had met. And I took some pictures, and that time I actually did send you a couple of the snaps that I took from it. And you were like, "Hey, these are great pictures. You should definitely do reviews and write some stuff up for Music Street Journal." And then at that time, because I took the initiative and actually followed up on emailing you, that's when we got started. And the first thing I did for Music Street Journal was a interview with Jonathan Payne, who was with Asia at the time.
Right.
And I did an interview with him, and like 2 months later, I did the live review of their show at the Abbey Pub in Chicago, and that was the first thing I ever did. And that's gosh, it's 17, close to 18 years
That's
now.
crazy.
Yeah, it flew by.
Yeah, and I know we wound up. I think we wound up shooting it. At least I think you were at one of the Heaven and Hell Motorhead
Yep, Testament.
shows. We were both shooting that show because you had a pass from somebody else too, and I
Correct.
had a pass there. I remember running into you there.
Yeah, and that one I did Testament and Motorhead, and you did Heaven and Hell and Judas Priest.
Right.
I didn't have authorization to do those two bands, but
That
yeah,
was
I've shot a ton of concerts for you for Music Street Journal, UFO. I've done some Judas Priest. I've done Rush, which was kind of like a bucket list type of thing.
yeah. It was hard to get Rush photo passes. Very hard. I
I
couldn't
remember,
believe I pulled that off.
I remember I did some legwork and contacted SRO Productions in Canada.
Right.
And I was just like, who's the publicist? I want to get in touch with, whoever does the photo pass. And I probably I bothered that woman borderline stalking just to get the photo pass because I was like, I've got a ticket. I'm going to the show. I don't need a free ticket. All I want is the photo pass, because I was just like, I gotta see him. So I shot the Time Machine tour where they did the Moving Pictures album from front to back, and that was at Northerly Island in Chicago. And
Oh, nice.
then I still had the woman's information, and so when Snakes and Arrows came out, I went ahead and bothered her, and I got a photo pass for Tinley Park for the I think it was the second leg of the Snakes and Arrows tour.
Yeah, because I was just I actually got I got tickets to one Rush show. I can't remember what tour it was, but they played the United Center, and Josh Turner and I went to that show. And then they actually sent me the Snakes and Arrows CD too when it came out to review.
Wow.
But I wasn't when I got the tickets for the United Center. I tried so hard to get a photo pass, and they just would not budge on it. So getting photo passes for Rush was hard.
Yeah, and I remember trying to do. I tried for Kiss. I tried for Iron Maiden. Some of those bands are just impossible.
Oh God, I have a horror story for you on Iron Maiden.
Is this '99 at the Aragon?
No, this was at the Eagles Ballroom in
Okay.
Milwaukee. So I had a photo pass, and the camera I had a flash on it, but it was disabled. And so we're waiting for the band to come on, right?
Mhm.
And some idiot in the pit shoots a picture of like Eddie on the screen or something, and his flash goes off. The tour manager goes down the row, and everybody who had a flash on their camera, he boots us out of the thing before the band ever hit the stage. I was so ticked.
Yeah, that would aggravate me because it's kind of like, why did you use a flash to begin with?
Yeah, dude, you don't use a flash to shoot a concert.
No, I mean, yeah, it's just not only is it annoying for the artist, but when I was younger, I always disliked the photos that you would see like in circus magazines sometimes, where the concerts weren't very colorful. They were very black and white or monochromatic because of the flash.
Right,
And if you didn't use a flash, the concert, to me, the picture represented more what you saw with your eye, where
right,
you would
because
see
you get the
colored
stage lighting.
lights. Yeah. So I never shot with the flash. It was never something I even wanted to, even if they allowed me.
No,
And yeah. No, Iron Maiden, I got to shoot them once in '99 at the Aragon Ballroom for the Ed Hunter tour, and that was the only time. And I've asked them, I've gone through Live Nation, I've gone through um, Rod Smallworth's management company, and I've just been like, hey, listen, I don't need a free ticket. Photo pass is all I want. It doesn't cost you any money, like a free ticket or anything, but for whatever reason, they just didn't want to give it to me.
yeah, I think I think it was the Ed Hunter tour when they were at the Eagle Ballroom when that happened. I think.
Probably because that at the Eagle Ballroom is about the size of the Aragon.
Yeah, and I remember the funny thing about that show too. I was there with Mike Korn actually, and once I got booted out of the photo pit, I was, needless to say, I was kind of pissed off, and so it was really hot. And if you're in the Eagle Ballroom and that place when it's a hot day, man, that place just heats up so bad.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wandered off, and I found that there was a little bar inside there, and it was the only place in the place that was air conditioned, and they had TV screens showing the concert. So I sat and watched the concert there.
In comfort, yeah.
Yeah,
I was
so I was like, because I was like, I was so ticked off anyway. I'm like, I really don't. I lost my interest in the show at that point for a while, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna wander. And I found that it's like, okay, this is where I'm staying until the end of the show.
Yeah, and I when it gets hot at some of those shows, like the Aragon show, I'm assuming the Eagles Club was probably around the same time as the Aragon one.
Yeah, I would
I
guess.
remember correctly, it was like a hot August day, and the Aragon was so bad, and they took out all the seats, so it was just standing room only, and it was so packed in the front that I remember they were pulling people out over the barricade because they were passing out, and
Oh
it
my
was
god.
getting crushed. Because Iron Maiden at that point, when Bruce came back, was probably a bigger deal than what the venue could hold
Yeah,
because for Brave New World, the album after, they played the United Center and they played Tinley Park and they played Marcus Amphitheater. So they were playing bigger venues.
yeah, they were huge by then, and
And
they've
now
been
they're
huge ever
extremely huge.
since. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like one of the few metal bands that can just go and sell out huge arenas and or huge stadiums. It's like nobody can do that but them.
Yeah, they've got some staying power, and it's funny because they're one of those bands that I think, even though they come out and they play new music, which I appreciate, they're one of those bands that, for whatever reason, became multi generational. There's a lot of bands that I love that unfortunately aren't. Blue Oyster Cult, love them to death. But when you go to one of their shows, you don't see a lot of young people unless it's like a festival type of thing.
Right.
Um, it's generally older folks that remember them from the 70s and possibly early 80s. Iron Maiden, for whatever reason, and Rush was like this as well. You'd go to a show and you'd see somebody in their 70s and you'd see somebody in their early teens. And so they
Yeah.
were able to capture that, which is great for them business wise. But, and one of the things I've noticed with Iron Maiden, they were road dogs when Power Slave was, because I remember seeing Power Slave at Poplar Creek, and they used to hit every market. And now they're very selective about where they play, and they'll do like they'll when I saw them in Chicago, they did not play Milwaukee or any of the surrounding areas. The closest place they played was Detroit. So
Yeah.
they
So if you wanted to see them, you were going to that one show, which is how they pull
exactly
in so many people.
yeah. So they're just one of those bands that can do that now. They're lucky in that respect. Metallica's another one, multi generational, and they're huge. They're playing Soldier Field. They're not even playing these clubs anymore.
Yeah, I remember talking about multi generational. I remember in 2004 when we covered Ozfest, and I remember because Sabbath was headlining, but Priest was the band before that,
Mhm.
and I was standing when Priest was on. I was standing by a bunch of kids. I say kids; they were probably 15 years old, maybe 16, and they were like sort of not really paying much attention. And Priest hit the stage, and about two or three songs in, I heard one of them go, "My God, these guys are good." So I was like, "Hey,
No
they just made
kidding.
some new fans."
Yeah, that's why we've been listening to them since the 70s.
Yeah, they were like blown away by how good they were. They weren't expecting it. I think they were there for a lot of the younger bands.
Yeah, and I guess Ozfest was good in that respect because it brought newer bands that these young kids would then see the older guard and they would be like, "Oh, okay, this is good." And Ozzy's one of those ones too that turned multi generational, and unfortunately, Sabbath for a long time, because I loved the Ronnie James Dio version. That was actually the first version of Sabbath that I got into. And when Gillan came on board, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then Tony Martin and Glenn Hughes, all those albums, I loved them, but they kind of lost favor. And
Yeah,
Ozzy just continued to grow and grow and grow. And it seemed like he eclipsed Sabbath until the very end, where Sabbath became kind of like, the grandfathers, the
yeah,
grandfathers of metal, where people finally recognized it. But for a long period of time, they couldn't sell tickets in Chicago.
yeah. It was crazy. I was into Sabbath when it was Ozzy. Um, Ozzy was originally the singer. I was there, and I remember when Ozzy was out, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is going to be any good. But I knew who Dio was from Rainbow, so I was like, well, he's good, so they got to be good, and they were. Um, Funny thing was, Ozzy was touring with his first tour, and I had got tickets for the show in Rockford, and I found out they were going to do an interview at the radio station. And so I thought, I'm going to go meet Ozzy. So we drove over there. My girlfriend, who is now my wife, and I drove over there. And we went and we waited. Ozzy and Sharon show up in a yellow cab and get out. And we stopped them and got autographs and chatted with them for a little bit, although I had trouble understanding what the hell Ozzy was saying. But
That hasn't changed.
no, no. But yeah, the thing was, he was incredibly nice, incredibly nice. And then Sharon was like, "Well, we've got to go in. We're late for the interview." And Ozzy walked backwards to wave goodbye to us. I was like,
Oh,
"Wow,
yeah. I mean, times have changed, because back then, when the first tour, Ozzy's first tour, he was hoping it would be a success. So
yep,
he was probably, both him and Sharon were more than happy to meet up with any fans and do whatever they could just to get the word out that, hey, Ozzy's touring.
yep,
And then fast forward 20 years later, and it's a totally different thing.
yeah, yeah." I remember this was funny when we did the Ozfest thing, and I kept it for a while, and I lost it eventually. You know how sometimes when you get a photo passer, they'll give you a set of rules that you're supposed to look over and at. Well, they handed out a set of rules for backstage at Ozfest, and one of the rules, I am not kidding. One of the rules was do not ogle Sharon.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
like, really?
Okay. No problem there.
Yeah. For the record, I never saw her back there, but
Yeah.
I
No,
did walk past Ian Hill of Judas Priest once, though.
yeah, I've seen some of those things where, like, you're not supposed to look at them. Uh,
Yeah,
and that was one of the things, because I did Crew Fest 2, the Motley Crue thing.
yeah,
And I was talking to somebody from, I guess it was Live Nation, who did the concert. And I was talking to somebody, and they said, yeah, the rider or whatever states that none of the staff can ask for autographs. They don't want you to look at them. They don't want, it's like they want to be left completely alone. And I'm like, get over yourselves.
yeah.
But
I don't know if I ever told you this. I got flipped off by Nikki Six.
really,
Yeah, when they were playing, it was I forget what four bands were on the show at Rockford Metro Center. I don't know if it was BMO Center by then or whatever, but anyway, Josh Turner and I went down there to cover it, and they had to shoot at the soundboard all the way to the back, and the place was a zoo, and you had to go out into outside of the thing and get around to get back there, and then get forward. And so I'm like fighting the crowds with my camera bag on for before and after every band, right? And so I get back to the seat, and Motley Crue's playing, and I was tired, man. I've been hauling through these crowds multiple times and stuff, trying to get pictures. And I'm sitting down, and we were in a place where Nicky could see us. And he's like just sat there. That's when he flipped us off.
That's funny. Yeah, he's an interesting character. And when I did the Crew Fest show, they made us shoot from the soundboard there as well.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy. You better hope you have a telephoto.
yeah, and at the time I had a telephoto, but it really wasn't my very good one that I got later. And
Yeah.
so, it is what it is. And it's they said, oh, it's because there's pyrotechnics in the pit area. They didn't launch any pyrotechnics. So I was like, well, that's obviously a joke. There's a place out here called the Smart Financial Center, and it's in Katy, Texas, or no, Sugarland. And if you're in the photo area, that's by the soundboard. They don't allow anybody in the pit area
Oh
ever.
wow.
So I did a Judas Priest show for Music Street Journal. It was Judas Priest, Saxon, and Black Star Riders.
Yeah, I remember when you did that
Yeah,
one.
and that was at the Smart Financial Center, and yeah, at least there the place where you go to do that is like it's raised up, so you're above the crowd. Plus the
Right.
fact that there's only a few people in this area by the soundboard where they specifically for photos, and they actually have seats in there, and it's kind of
Oh,
nice in that
that's
respect.
completely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other
Um,
than the strangest one I think I ever did, the most difficult one to ever shoot was that Ozfest show because the small stage was fine because you could get right up to the stage and shoot. They had a little area for the photographers. But when it came to the big stage, which I didn't get to shoot Sabbath, but I got to shoot everybody else at the big stage. When you got to the big stage, um, you had to go. They walked you in front of the people who were in the front row. So they've got the seats, and then you're between the people in the front row and the security fence. So you've got people behind you, and when Slayer hit the stage, I've got guys moshing into my back as I'm trying to take pictures.
yeah, that confounds me. Why would they do that when they've got a photo pit area? It just
Well, they did. In fairness on that one, they did actually. Sabbath had these big cannon things that shot out confetti, and they were in the photo pit area.
oh,
So
okay.
they obviously couldn't have gotten you into the photo pit area because they had all this gear in there.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, I guess. The weirdest ones that I've had, I've been like Crew Fest. They let me shoot, and then after Motley Crue, I had to actually go to the car and drop off my camera.
Oh, I've had those before too. I can't remember one, but I've had concerts like that too. You got to go drop your camera off at the car, come back in to see the rest of the show.
Yeah, and that always bothered me. And that I remember I did the Scorpions on their. Well, I don't know if they did multiple farewell tours, but it was the one that was their farewell tour that they were saying, and it was a
Yeah.
Stick to Tail tour. And I did it the Rosemont Theater in Rosemont, Illinois, and that was with Michael Schenker opening up. And I really wanted my camera in the venue because I knew Michael Schenker was going to jump up on stage with the Scorpions, but they were like, just hounding us. And as soon as we got out, they were like, okay, you, come on. And they had somebody in front and somebody in back, making sure that we actually exited the building. And sure enough, Michael Schenker got up on stage for Coast to Coast and Another Piece of Me. And I've got no photographic proof of it. But
But I bet there are a million people who had cameras or a
yeah,
phone
they
that
had
did.
exactly. So that's what, for me, it's like, really, you've got people recording the whole concert. What does it matter if I get a couple pictures from my seat in the back or
Yeah,
something?
it's especially kind of dumb now because there's everybody in that place has a phone with a camera and they shoot video, they can shoot pictures. It's like, although I guess iPhones will shut down. Supposedly they shut them down when bands come when they try to record at a live concert. That's what I've heard. I don't know if it's true.
It depends on some places, I guess, because I've met a couple people here in Houston that I've met at shows, and one of the guys, that's what he does. He records the show and then he posts it on YouTube and on his Facebook. And he doesn't seem to have an issue with it. He's got more of an issue of his phone dying because the battery's dead more than the actual the venue shutting off the phone on it.
Yeah.
It's I don't get the whole phone thing just because I can understand if you wanted to take a couple pictures, you're up front. But if you're 30 rows back and you're trying to take pictures or record the whole show, it's
Yeah.
like, are you really ever going to watch it? Are you ever going to
Yeah.
see it?
You're
Most
gonna
bands
post it up
now,
on YouTube, or what are you doing here?
yeah. And most
What?
bands nowadays, um, because albums, I guess, don't sell as much, you'll see them put out a studio and then the next one will be a live release with the DVD. And then
Yeah.
they'll put out another studio and the same goes. And so your crappy little iPhone video is never going to match what they're putting out
No.
live. So I just don't understand it. But that's concerts nowadays. When I sometimes I'll shoot from the back, um, if the venues don't care, because I have gone to some venues that they're just like first three songs up front and then you just have to go to your seat, and I'll sneak some pictures. And then everybody's got their hands in the air with their iPhones and stuff. And I'm like, it's just, I remember back in the day, people would just be smoking pot and mellowing out. And now it's that, and
Well, you know what's funny? I remember this was probably 20 years ago, maybe not quite that long. I saw some college did a study, and what they did was they took a bunch of students and they divided them into two groups, and they did a lecture or something, some event they did, and they told one group to get as much of it as they could on their phones, and they told the other group to not have their phones out at all. And then afterwards, they gave them a quiz on it. And then they switched for the next, they did another event, and they switched which group was doing which thing.
Mhm.
And they found that the group that was using their phones remembered far less of the event than the ones who were just sitting there watching it did.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you really want to enjoy the concert, put your phone away.
Yeah.
Like you said, maybe get it out for a couple pictures and put the thing away.
Be there for the moment. I mean,
Yeah, you paid money for this thing, you know?
I went and saw Marillion in Dallas on the last time they came through the US. And right before they came out on stage, their manager came out and said, listen, folks, there's be respectful of the people behind you. Plus, put your phones away. Enjoy the show. Be in the moment at the show. He's like, if you want to take a couple pictures or whatever, fine. But he goes, don't record the whole show. Just enjoy it. You're never going to recreate it. And I have to say, either that's a Marillion crowd type of thing or people took it to heart, but I didn't see many phones out, which was great. Because I was like, this is the way concerts used to be. People watched what was going on stage.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the first going back to what I was mentioning, getting into Black Sabbath during the Dio years, the first concert I ever photographed was back in 1981, Black Sabbath on the Mob Rules tour at the International Amphitheater. And it was just a whole different concert experience. And I remember back then, that was just at the cusp of when they were starting to monitor whether or not you had a photo pass to go to bring your camera into the concert. Because I brought my camera in and security would only allow me one roll of film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they wouldn't let me anymore. And I had sixth row for the show.
Oh, geez.
And because I remember trying to get, after that, it was like impossible. And MTV kind of ruined it because as soon as MTV came on board, that's when image became such a big deal. And they wanted to kind of, have control over their image. And it still pops up every once in a while. I shot, it was Blue Oyster Cult was opening up and Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo were closing the show. And this was at Naperville Rib Fest. And her manager came out and he was, if you wanted to shoot her, you actually had to sign a release form that stated that you would send them all the pictures that you wanted to use, and then they would send back and go, you can use these, you can't use these.
Oh wow.
And this is going back, I want to say 2015 maybe. So it wasn't that long ago. At least, doesn't seem that long. It's 7, 8 years ago, but that was really odd, and I refused to sign. I was just like, no, I'm not going to go home and send you my pictures, you know, because I take a lot of them, especially now with digital cameras.
Oh
I just
yeah.
shoot, and I take a lot of pictures, and I'm like, I'm not going to send, get home from Naperville to my house was going to be an hour and 40-minute ride anyway. So I was probably going to get home around 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm going to sit on my computer and upload pictures just so that you can possibly allow me to use some of them. And
Yeah.
so I said no. And I went into the crowd and I got pretty close and I just pulled out my telephoto lens and took pictures anyway. You
Yeah,
know?
and that's the thing again. It's like how much good is it going to do them? Some of these phones can take some pretty darn good
Oh,
pictures.
yeah.
So it's like you're not going to control that. You're going to take people's phones away from them.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of some artists like I think it was Alicia Keys required you to put your phone in like this zipper lock bag that would be put in the coat check area,
Oh,
and you can't bring it into the venue at all. Your phone, it doesn't matter. You could be like, "Hey, I've got my kids, babysitter with them in case something happens. I want to be able to have them get in contact with me." Nope, they don't allow it at all. And comedians are starting to do that as well.
well, I mean, I can see it from their point of view because of the video.
Hmm.
You know, because a lot, especially comedians, if their jokes, if you've already heard all their jokes,
Yeah.
you know, um, but on the other hand, they ought to let you know that in advance because, again, if somebody does have kids at home and they need to make sure they've got a phone in case there's an emergency, someone can get a hold of them, then they sure as hell better know that you're going to take their phone away before they make the decision to buy the ticket and go to the show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really it. I understand it from an artist standpoint, but you're right. They should definitely let people know because that may change the difference between them wanting to go to the show or not.
Yeah,
Um, I in Alicia Keys's situation, I read the article and she said that she does what artists used to do, where they actually perform material that's not on an album to kind of work it out and see if it works well with the other material and see how the crowd's reaction is to it. And
right.
camera phones ruin that.
Right,
'Cause-
I've heard of that from other artists too. There are quite a few artists will do that, and some of them still do it even though it winds up on YouTube the next day.
yeah, because I've got some bootlegs of Pink Floyd where they were messing out on tour and they were playing stuff from Animals before the album even came out, and the versions that are on that bootleg are not even close to what eventually wound up on the actual legitimate release.
Oh wow,
So yeah, but yeah, it was fortuitous that you and I got together in those shows because I've been a fan of music for, gosh, since I can remember, since seeing Kiss Alive, the album. And photography was also a big part of my hobbies. And this was a way for me to get both of them into one. And I loved shooting all those shows for Music Street Journal. And I get a kick out of even just seeing my photos online. It's kind of cool. It's I realize that anybody can post any pictures of whatever they take, but it's to me it's like, well, Music Street Journal is an official official web magazine, and it's my photos are part of it.
yeah, we're not. I mean, that's the thing too. I've had, I don't know, we're not like some blog or just somebody's Facebook page. We're a publication that has been around for 25 years. There's a little bit of difference there.
Yeah, a lot of difference because there's been a lot of stuff that's come and gone.
Yeah,
It's it in I'm looking at the dates and stuff, and so I've been doing stuff for 17 years from Music Street Journal. So you were doing it for 8 years prior to that even. That's
yep.
a good clip. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's insane. I never thought it would have gotten to be 25 years later and I'd still be doing it.
Yeah, but I look at it and I remember my mom always going, "Hey, when are you going to outgrow this? And when are you going to start, doing something that's adult?" And I said, "I am doing something that's adult. This is what I enjoy. If going to work 9 to 5 and then just coming home and planting myself in front of the television set is adult, then count me out."
Yeah,
I still have a 9 to 5 job, I guess. It's not 9 to 5 necessarily. Sometimes it's 8 to 7 or whatever. But I enjoy what I do for a living. But I do that specifically so that I can enjoy my free time and collecting music and going to concerts and photographing concerts and discovering new bands, and that's a passion. That's what I really enjoy doing. And like I said, I'm thankful for meeting my buddy Mark, who then in turn got me to meet you. And it kind of, the stars aligned. You don't I always believe that fate happens, and wishing for something to happen differently in the past, I always think, well, if I did something differently in the past, it might have put me in a different position that I would not have met the people or done the things that have put me where I am today. And I like where I'm at today. So it's kind of the butterfly effect.
yeah,
It's I I wasn't very studious at the beginning of college, and luckily that's what prompted me uh, to be where I am today, because I was working at a hospital, and I've got Aerosmith to thank for meeting my wife, because she worked the day shift, I worked the night shift, and I was going to see Aerosmith at Alpine Valley, and I had to switch my evening shift for a day shift, so I switched, and that's when I first met her.
oh
And I was
wow,
like, yeah, I would never have met her if it wasn't for Aerosmith. So it's, and all the things. Like I said, if I was so into music that I managed to meet my buddy Mark, who then I met you, and
yeah,
then through you
and
I
I'm
met
very
many
glad
more.
we met because not only are you a contributor, but I consider you a good friend too.
Yeah, yeah. We send each other Christmas cards, and
Yep,
we send each other emails and stuff just to see how we're doing.
yep. And we used to get together when you were still up here in northern
Yeah,
Illinois. Once in a while,
little
we
bit
get to.
more of a drive now. A little bit more of a
Yeah,
drive now.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't see myself coming down to Texas, buddy.
yeah. You don't like the hot weather.
No, I do not.
I I have to say I love it. It's I think tomorrow's going to be 81 or 82 here.
Oh, tomorrow we're getting freezing rain.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah, tomorrow it's like I'm supposed to do one with John Pierpoint tomorrow. I'm supposed to do one of these at well, it's like because he's in England, so it's like 9:15 p.m. for him, but it's 3:15 for me.
uh
And I sent him an email a little while ago. I said they're calling for freezing rain. I said if you wind up going into the chat and I'm not there, wait until like 5 minutes after, and what that means is we lost power and I'm not coming in.
Yeah. I mean, we lose power here occasionally. Obviously there's hurricanes that's a problem. I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't lived through one of the really bad windy ones. I 2 weeks after we moved here, I dealt with Harvey,
I
and
remember that.
that was a tough one. And it was hard because we were in an apartment because we hadn't bought a house yet, and we were on the ground level, and the water kept creeping up, creeping up. Luckily enough, we didn't. It didn't get into the apartment or anything like that. But I was worried because a lot of my music stuff was in storage,
Oh,
and
jeez.
I was just like, okay, did the storage area get flooded? Because the moving company that moved my stuff from Gurney down here, they kept it in storage until we found a house, and then they would bring it to the house. So I was sweating it out. The only thing that I kept my vinyl in Chicago, because I was afraid with the storage units here, if it was heated, it would
Oh
warp
yeah.
gums. So I left it at my mom's house, and then I made that drive from Chicago to here in one go. I rented a van so that I could have air conditioning, and it took me 19 hours to get here.
Oh jeez.
But I did it all in one shot because I was like, I'm not going to lose my albums. But the things we do for music.
So why don't you kind of give the viewers a little idea of what kind of music you like anyway? What what stuff really sticks out for you?
Oh well, music wise, I I probably don't have as wide a selection as maybe some of the other people that work for MSG or MSJ. Um, but I probably like my earliest stuff was that I liked was Elton John. Um, I liked probably the pop stuff, Queen, stuff that was on the radio. That's where I first.
I was going to say
Uh,
that's one thing we have in common. Elton John was my favorite artist for a while when I was growing up, um, and then it went from Elton John to Yes. But yeah, so we have Elton John in common.
yeah, and it took me a while to do the Yes thing because because it was like Elton John and Queen, but obviously it was more the songs that were on the radio. So Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, Pinball Wizard, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, that type of stuff. And for Queen, it was We Will Rock You, and probably before then, like Bohemian Rhapsody and Killer Queen. That's the stuff that I kind of gravitated towards. And then I went to my parents went to a dinner to meet up with some friends, and they had an older daughter, and I went and we were talking, and she pulled out Kiss Alive, the album, and I saw the cover, and I was just like, oh, these guys look dangerous, and that I like that. And nowadays you look at it and that's tame, but
Yeah,
back in the day that was considered like really dangerous, and I became a huge Kiss fan. I was like a fanatic for a number of years, and did the whole Kiss Army thing, and uh, but then I went to another parents' friend, and this was a guy named John Marlega, and he was a Beatles fan, but he also had Jethro Tull, Aqualung, and Yes, Fragile, and that's what got me into that type of music. And all of a sudden, I was like, "Hey, this prog stuff is pretty cool. I like these time changes, and it's different." And of course, when I heard Rush, I was like, "Okay, this is kind of like the heaviness from the rock side, but then the progressive side." And it was just a melding of the two, and I was like, "Oh, this is Nirvana for me." And so I continued on that path, and I was big into that stuff. Then of course the new wave of British heavy metal kicked in, and I was huge into that. Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. Well, Judas Priest was a little bit before new
yeah.
wave of British heavy metal, but I was into Priest. Uh, that shirt you're wearing, Killing Machine in Europe, and then Hellbent for Leather here in the States. That was my first foray into them.
That
Uh,
was mine as well.
yeah, that was. I remember I was going to school, and one of the kids' older brothers had a Judas Priest T-shirt, and I was like, Judas Priest. That was kind of like a scary name. But then he brought the album to school, and I borrowed it, and I was like, oh, this is phenomenal. And then I went and got Stained Class and Sin After Sin and Unleashed in the East. And then obviously, like I said, new wave of British heavy metal came on board, and I was like into that. And then when Metallica and stuff, that the thrash stuff came in, I like that as well. Although I'm a bit selective on that. Not everything stuck with me. I remember like Slayer and Merciful Fate and Venom. Those bands, even though I was a little bit older, they was kind of scared me a little bit because I'm like, they're dealing with like the occult and devil worship and stuff like that, and I'm like, even though I was into Sabbath at the time, I knew that was just them writing songs about it. They weren't really into it. But I'd read an article in Kerrang on Merciful Fate, and you've got King Diamond going, "Oh yeah, the devil's a great guy," and all this stuff. And I was like, "Okay, this is getting a little scary." I've learned to realize that that was just an act, and these are just normal guys and everything. But I got into like Slayer and Venom and Exodus, but that was really kind of the end for me. I do still like some power metal. Like I love Hammerfall. Um, I love that stuff. But and there's newer bands that like I love Primal Fear. To me, they took the template of Judas Priest's which one was the one Painkiller, and they kind of ran with that. And I think they're a really good band. There's a lot of stuff, but when it starts getting into the death metal stuff like Deicide and the Band Death and Cannibal Corpse, I'm not into that stuff. So there came a point where it's like, okay, the music got to an extreme level, and then I stopped. I was like, okay, this is I like a lot of melody, and I like riffs that are catchy, and some of that stuff just to me seemed very noisy. Just like I'm not into the Cookie Monster vocals very much. I like more of the clean vocals. It's okay if they use them here and there, but I generally like the clean vocals. Yeah, that's and to be fair, I also love Foreigner, Journey, um, that type of stuff. Survivor. I remember Survivor. I liked them from the first album on. They were a staple in the Chicago area and on that radio. I think it was WMET and the Loop used to play them all the time. And so I love that music as well on the softer side. I'll listen to ABBA. I don't like if I listen to country music, it has to be like Johnny Cash or Merle Haggard. Some of the older guys. I don't like a lot of the newer pop country.
Yeah, a lot of the newer stuff is really nothing but modern pop music that they call
Yeah.
country, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And kind of Garth Brooks was the one that kind of brought that into the pop realm because he was almost like a rock person who was trying to be a rock star. Or I'm
Yeah,
sorry, a country
I
person.
kind of like him though.
Yeah, I mean there's some stuff that he writes that I think is good, but in general that type of music I'm not really that into it. My wife is a lot more eclectic in music. She loves country music, but she'll go from. Do you remember that one song? I think it was in the late '60s or early '70s, where it's a woman and it's "I've Never Been to Me."
Oh, I remember that song.
Yeah, so she'll listen to that, and then she has like on her playlist when she works out, she has that all the way to ABBA. Then she'll go to Five Finger Death Punch, and it's like just a wide swath of music where I'm a little bit more in the rock realm. I can appreciate certain stuff, but as far as collecting goes, it's definitely going to be rock and metal. Yeah.
It's funny. I've got a big 300 CD changer, and if I'm not working on reviews and I'm just working on other stuff, in the mornings I listen to the radio for the morning show, but then I turn on the changer on shuffle, and I've got a weird mix of stuff in there. It'll go from the Beatles to Metallica to the Dead Boys to the B-52s. To,
Wow.
it goes all over the place.
Yeah, that's pretty eclectic. Yeah. I mean, like I
Tori
said,
Amos is even in there.
wow, Tori Amos. Yeah, I like Tori. I mean, I like that. And I actually like Sarah McLachlan, although damn her for using that song Angel in the ASPCA commercials. I,
Yeah,
I can't watch them. I'm just
no,
like,
I can't either. I can't either.
I'm
I
an
know
animal lover. So it's
you're
like,
very much an animal lover, just as I am, and it's like, no, I have to change the channel. It's like,
yeah,
can't do
exactly. But yeah, I can listen to that. There's a lot. Melissa Etheridge, I like. There's a lot of stuff that I like, but there for me to actually go out and buy a CD of that stuff, I doubt it. I don't really. I tend to buy the stuff that I really really like. There's like and I bought things many, many times. Like the UFO collection, I've probably bought like 6 times now because I bought the albums, I bought the cassettes, then I bought the first CDs, then I bought the remastered CDs, then I bought the remaster with bonus tracks, and now they're releasing them with additional bonus tracks and live stuff. And same thing with Rush when they released the deluxe editions of those. I was just like, yeah, it's Rush. I'm going to buy it. Doesn't matter. Yeah, it's although I have to say I never bought Alex Lifeson's Victor CD, nor did I buy his latest project where he played guitar on some particular album where he's like a guitarist in that band. And I heard it and I was like, you know, and I'm never going to listen to it. It just wasn't something that I would be into. But conversely, I do love Geddy Lee's My Favorite Headache album. I think that's a great album.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Getty.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I run a large and concerts. I'm a little bit more open minded, just because I love live music, and so I've gone to see country stuff all the way to Cradle of Filth.
You said Cradle of Filth?
I saw Cradle of Filth on their first ever show in Chicago when they played the Riviera Theater with Orgies with Pigs. It was their first time in the U.S. And I went and saw that at that place, the Riviera Theater. And I remember it was they didn't have the balcony open, so it was not a very crowded show. It was a Sunday night, and I remember thinking to myself, I like Cradle of Filth's music. The vocals I can give or take. And I remember we were backstage, and my buddy Mark, who I mentioned earlier, we were doing an interview with one of the people from Cradle of Filth, and Danny Filth walked in, and I had an old Burn magazine. Remember those from Japan? I had that with me that had some live concerts pictures in it. So I had him sign it. He did not speak to anybody before the show. He like people came up to him and got autographs, and he was fine with that, but he would not say a word. And I was wondering if he was maybe saving his voice because the way he sings can't be good for your vocal cords.
No, I can't imagine it is.
Yeah.
He seems like, I mean, obviously, I've never met the guy. I've just seen interviews, and I reviewed a movie that he's in, but he seems like a pretty intense person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'd find, I don't usually get intimidated by people, but I think I might find him just a little intimidating.
Yeah, he was the only person. I'm trying to think of people that I've met that I kind of got maybe slightly intimidated, like I was afraid to approach them, even though I was backstage. I think Ian Gillan was one of them. He was kind of like I was afraid to walk up to him because I was like, is he going to kick me out? Is he going to tell me to leave or what? And trying to think of who else. Dave Mustaine was like that. I met him, and he was. I always, am afraid that I'm going to catch the Dave Mustaine who's having a bad day.
Yeah,
Dave Mustaine, because I've met him a couple of times, and a couple of times he's been good, and one time I met him, and he wasn't a very pleasant person, and I was like, I don't want to get kicked out from the backstage area because I'm enjoying being back here, but I did approach him, and he actually turned out to be very nice, but. And you know what? Lemmy was another one. Lemmy was another one.
I would have been a little intimidated by Lemmy. I never got to meet him.
Yeah, I met him, and he was. We were backstage, and my friend Mark was doing an interview with them, and we got through with the interview, and I asked him for some autographs, and I had a lot of CDs with me. And he was just like, well, I'll sign a few. And I'm like, oh, this will go really quick, And so he did sign them all. And I remember I Have Another Perfect Day, which is my favorite Motorhead album. And I went to go get that signed because I put the CDs down. and I turned around and there was a woman backstage who was very attractive, and she was talking with them. And I picked up the album and I was holding it in my hand, and I could see from he gave me one of those side eye things like, don't even think about it. And so I just put the album back and I was like, thank you. Walked away. Uh, yeah, he was definitely somebody that I was a little bit intimidated. And he's not a very tall guy, or his personality is what was intimidating.
Yeah, and he could, from what I heard, he could be absolutely just super nice and very, very pleasant, or he could get a real attitude with you.
Yeah. Yeah, he that day he was fine up until I brought that album out, and I was like, and he was, I think he was kind of like, haven't I done enough for you already?
Yeah,
And he gave me that side eye, like, hey, there's this nice looking woman talking to me. I need to be, talking to some fanboy. And so I never got that signed, unfortunately. I did get my CD of Another Perfect Day signed, but I didn't get that signed. So,
nice.
but it's still fun, and I still, no matter what it is, what kind of thing happens, I still look at it and go, my God, I would have, if I could go back to my young me and visit and go back in time and say in 1979, 1980, you're going to meet a lot of the people that you admired, and you're going to be able to take pictures at their concerts. And I would have been like, no way, never going to happen. And
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way about
yeah,
that.
yeah, because look at all the guys you've met too. I mean, you've been friends with the guys from Yes for a long
Some of
time,
them, yeah.
and obviously Cheap Trick, Alice Cooper, you're in good with, Judas Priest.
No, I don't. I never met Alice. I wish I had. I was I was in pretty good with his publicist for a while.
Mm.
But which is how I got to shoot him. But I never got to meet him. He and Rob Halford and Tori Amos are, when I started doing interviews, there were 5 people I wanted to interview, and those are the 3 on that list of 5 I haven't interviewed yet. So,
Oh, you still haven't interviewed those three?
nope.
Wow. I would have figured you would have gotten Rob Halford at some point, even with his fight days.
I have tried so many times and it just can't get it. And I was in good with Judas Priest's manager for a while, to the point where um, she would give me photo passes and not give anybody else a photo pass.
Oh,
Like,
Jane Andrews?
yes, like at Ozfest, Ozfest '04, I was the only one who was allowed to shoot Priest out of all the photographers there that day. She denied everybody else's photo pass, but I got one.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
I've always been good on getting photo passes and stuff, but you've never been able to secure the interview. I interviewed Glenn Tipton once by phone, but no, never gotten that one.
Yeah, I've gotten some good ones over the phone. But I've also done some really cool ones in person for Music Street Journal. I did Phil Mogg from UFO. I did Uli John Roth. I did Andy Parker from UFO. I'm trying to think of all the ones that I did in person. Oh, I did Phil Demmel from Machine Head in person. I did that James Labrie from Dream Theater. That was in person. That was when they were on the Octavarium tour.
Nice. I interviewed Portnoy in person once.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
and
was
he's a
super
great
cool.
guy.
Yeah, he was super cool. That was when they were on tour with Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Deep Purple.
Oh, nice.
Because we actually did. It was funny. We actually did the interview in Deep Purple's tour bus.
That's cool.
Yeah,
And that, what a great triple bill as well.
yeah, that was good.
I think that was Falling into Infinity.
Yeah, I think it was actually.
Yeah.
I got one of the funniest ones, which I didn't wind up printing it. I suppose if it were today, I probably would have. Was I interviewed Tony from Godsmack backstage at Ozfest one year, and I remember I'm sitting there with him, and I asked him a question. I don't even remember what question I asked him, and he was like, Dude, I don't know. I smoke a lot of weed. I don't have the best memory.
That is too funny. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because there are people that I've interviewed over the phone who were, and I'm not going to say who it was, but they were extremely nice and generous and had, all the time in the world for me and my questions. And then when I met them in real life backstage or, you know, record sign, it's like they were just not very nice people. And I was just like, wow, it's so weird. It's like a totally different person. And and one of the people I've met on a number of occasions, and that person's just always been an unpleasant person each time I've met them. It's just they're just having a bad life, not even a bad day.
That's
Some
funny.
of the other ones, it was like, well, I understand it's a bad day, and
Yeah.
they're like anybody. I'm catch me on a bad day, and I'm not really interested in talking with people or doing anything.
You know, you want to hear a funny one? I don't think I've ever told you this story. When I interviewed Alan White on the phone, who has now, of course, passed away,
Yeah.
uh, but when I interviewed him on the phone, I was recording back then to transcribe, and I get done with the recording, and it was fortunate because I had to call him to do the interview. He didn't call me; I had to call him at the hotel. And I got done with the interview, and I looked, and the tape had snapped right at the beginning. So I thought, oh no, I don't have notes. I don't have a cassette. I got another cassette, put it in, and I called him back and asked him if he'd do the interview again, and he did.
Wow.
He was so nice. He did the interview again. And then the funny thing was, whenever I'd be at a Yes show and run into him, all I had to do was say, yeah, I was the guy who had to call you back. And he'd know exactly who I was.
That is funny. Well, I mean, at least you got a moment with them that's unique. It's something different. Yeah, I was always worried about that, or my cassette recorder chewing it up as I'm transcribing it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and some and I remember doing some of the phone interviews. I used to do them from work back when I worked downtown in Chicago at SPSS, and I remember I take my lunchtime and I would be recording them, and I remember some of them I had to say, "Hey, can you hold on a minute? I got to flip the tape," because they took up more than 45 minutes. And I remember I did one with Frank Marino, and that interview was well over an hour. And he was, "You got questions? I'll answer them. Just keep going." And when you asked the question, I remember looking at one time, I think it was 10 minutes before I got to ask the next question because he had just gone on and on.
Yeah, I interviewed him as well, and he was like that too. And I remember what was cool about that was in the interview I did with him. He griped about how journalists will do interviews and then just completely misquote him.
Mhm.
So as soon as I ran the interview, I sent it to him. I had an email address for him, and I sent it to him. And he wrote me back and said, "Yeah, you're one of the good guys."
Yeah. I remember, and I don't think I have the shirt anymore. I probably can't fit in it, but I had the Music Street Journal one with the Frank Zappa quote on it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What is it?
Rock journalism is
Yeah,
people who can't write, interviewing people who can't speak for people who can't read.
yeah,
I've always loved that quote.
yeah. That was a great quote. Yeah, and the way we did interviews here was always good because it was kind of, hey, you said it, I wrote it, and we gave you the whole thing. And kind of like Blabbermouth, unfortunately, does this, where they'll take just one line or one portion of a line, and they'll put it up there. And if you read the whole interview, you'll see that that one line really is kind of taken out of context,
Yes, I
and
hate that.
it's not even indicative of the whole interview. They'll say something that's just a portion of it, but if you read the whole thing, you'll get a better feel for what they were trying to explain.
Yeah,
Uh,
they like to put that one sentence on there to generate people clicking because
yeah,
it's sensationalism, and then they get in there and it's not the same thing at all.
yeah, and unfortunately, that's what some of these people do. But I think The fact that Music Street Journal has been around for 25 years and the interviews have been going on for that long kind of speaks for itself. And that, we when we did interviews, and I'm sure you did more interviews than I did, we put the whole thing down. We didn't
Well, and
edit
we
it.
still
We
do
didn't.
them. There are two in this issue, um, but I tend to do them by email these days.
Yeah.
I hate transcribing. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it was tough transcribing, but I think emails are good for a lot of these artists now as well, because you can send them the questions and they'll do it whenever they're free. There's
Yes.
not a time where they have to sit down and do it. Plus, if they're international, I did one with Tony Martin from Black Sabbath fame. He's out in the UK,
Yeah.
so um, with my job and everything like that, it'd be difficult for me to call the UK and record it and then transcribe it. And this was, boom, I sent it to him. A week later, it was up. So,
No, one of my favorite ones that I still remember was I had been trying to get an interview with Dave Brock from Hawkwind, and I came home one day, and on my answering machine, this message from Dave Brock saying, "Hey, you want to do an interview? We'll do one." And I wound up. But the funny thing was, I had to call him in England, and I called him, and we did the interview, and I think we talked for probably an hour. Super, super nice guy. Just love the guy. Great guy. And when I got the phone bill, it was like $250 for that
oh my
phone
God.
call. I was
Well,
like, okay, it's worth it, but
yeah,
I'm not doing it again.
yeah. When's the next time you're going to get Dave Brock to,
Exactly. I'm like, all right, I'll pay it, but I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, it's kind of some of the stuff too, like with some of the concerts I've reviewed where like Evergrey or Marillion. For me to drive to Dallas, because I'm not driving back, it's about 3.5 hours depending on where the venue is. So I'll get a hotel room and I'll spend the
Yeah,
night at a hotel room. So it's additional costs and stuff like that. But it's like, you know what? How many more times am I going to see Marillion? And they're one of my faves. So I'm gonna I'm gonna suck it up, and I'll drive there, and I'll take a day off of work, and I'll go see the show, and I'll get a hotel room and stay the night. And it's just worth it for me. It's kind of like your Dave Brock thing. It's like, when's the next time you're going to talk to him? It's
yeah,
worth
exactly,
it.
exactly. And I don't know about you, but for me, as I'm getting older, I literally can't see to drive at night anymore. So it's like if I go to a concert, I'm gonna have to go in the afternoon. Go there in the afternoon. I'm gonna have to get a room and stay there, and because I can't drive home in the dark.
Yeah, and the drive home from Dallas, you hit a pretty good patch of about an hour and a half to 2 hours of just complete darkness.
Oh
There's the road in front of you, and the only like traffic lights that you'll see are sometimes by the exits. But
God,
if you're driving, there's nothing on and I'm like, I'm tired. The last thing I want to do is get out of a show at 11:30 at night and then wind up getting home at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning.
exactly.
That's a young man's game.
I know. Yeah, unfortunately, unfortunately, man.
Yeah, yeah. I still love doing it though, and like I said, I'm more than happy to go out and check those bands out and go to the shows. Like I'll do that, or I think I did it for Music Street Journal. UFO. I went to San Antonio because the only place they played here in Houston on that tour was some like kind of country western bar type of place where they didn't sell single tickets. You had to buy a table which
Oh,
had
geez.
four tickets. And I'm like, I don't have four UFO friends here in the Houston area. So I took a trip to San Antonio, and they played at a place right on the Riverwalk called the Aztec Theater, and it's a beautiful theater, and I was glad I went. And as it
Nice.
turns out, that was the last time they ever came through. Even though they were saying they were going to retire, Phil Mogg had a heart attack, and so they've not had any more shows since then.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're pretty much done.
Yeah, a lot of my idols are hanging it up. You know, That's why when Judas Priest comes to town, I'm like, I gotta see him because I don't know when the last time will be.
Yeah, that's true too. Um, so far, they seem to keep going strong. Although it's basically what Rob Halford and Ian Hill are the only.
Yeah, still great shows though. I mean,
Yeah,
Richie Faulkner is amazing, and Andy Sneap does a great job of doing Glenn Tipton's material. And then Scott's been with the band for a long time.
yeah. Scott has been with them for what 20 years or more. More than that.
90, 91 or 92.
Yeah, he's been with them a very long time.
Yeah, because Painkiller was his first album.
Yeah. So he's a long term guy, and the other guys. I'm not saying they don't do a bad job. Or don't do a good job. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's sort of a hybrid Judas Priest now almost. But the funny thing was, I saw Halford with his band, and they were amazing too. I mean, they might as well have been Judas Priest in some
Oh yeah.
ways because they were so good.
Yeah, I saw them with Iron Maiden and Queensryche on the Halford was on his first album. Queensryche was forgot what album they were touring on, and it was Iron Maiden, Brave New World, and Halford was first on the bill, and yeah, he was great. He played
That,
the song "Stained Class" during that
oh
tour.
yeah,
I
that
was
was. See, I was supposed to see him on that tour, on that show. Mike Korn and I were driving to Alpine Valley to go see that tour, and there was an accident on the highway, and we were stopped for an hour and a half on the road. And by the time we got back going and got to the venue, Halford was already off the stage,
played.
so we didn't get to see him. We got to see Queensryche and Maiden. But then later, Mike and I went up to see him in Milwaukee. He was headlining, and again at the Eagle Ballroom, but it wasn't the big place; it was the small one on the second floor. And we just stood up by the stage because it was general admission. We got there early, stood at the stage, and Halford. I had my hand out like this, and Halford came up with his fist underneath it, which was
Nice.
yeah, that was a great show.
Yeah, I liked all his stuff, and Fight was okay. I liked it. The only thing I didn't like that he did was two.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about that. Fight was interesting. It was definitely very different than Priest, but it was very good. But
Yeah,
yeah, two just didn't sort of work for me. It was more
yeah,
industrial or something, as I remember.
yeah, and that's it was industrial, and I never really got it, and I was never into like Nine Inch Nails or anything like that. So it was kind of like when he went to that, I was kind of like, and he had that weird Uncle Fester look, whereas I
Yeah,
was just really dark and stuff.
yeah,
Um, and when he came back to Priest, I was like, thank God. Not that Ripper Owens did a bad job because he did a really good job, and I like Jugulator.
Did
Uh,
you see them? Did you see him live with Ripper?
no, I did not.
Mike and I went and saw him live with Ripper, and Mike thought the show was great. I saw about I don't know a dozen or so songs, and it was like to me it was like watching a really good Judas Priest tribute band. It just didn't seem like Judas Priest to me.
Mm.
So I went out in the lobby. Mike wrote the concert review. I went out in the lobby because it just didn't interest me. And I do like the albums with Ripper, not the live albums so much, but I do like the two studio albums. But I just didn't think it sounded like Priest to me with him in the band.
Yeah, I mean he did a really good job on the Halford stuff, but um, yeah, it was just a weird time for music because like I love Iron Maiden, and when what was that album that they
X,
first when they had the X Factor with
X
Blaze
Factor,
Bailey,
that's it. Yeah,
and then that one was I was like, okay, this is pretty good, and I saw that tour, and then Virtual 11 came out, and I didn't really like that album that much. Went and saw the tour because Dio was on the bill as well, and it was just kind of a weird kind of seeing them kind of like what you said. It was almost like seeing a really good band performing those classic songs. And it wasn't that it was just the singer because that I could overlook. The rest of it just seemed kind of like it wasn't like the metal gods that I was expecting. It was
right.
it was something that was kind of a watered down version of it. And it's I it would be unfair to say it was Ripper Owens or Blaze Bayley completely,
Right.
because there were other factors. But it's I love all that stuff, but those weren't my favorite tours of seeing the bands. It's like I like the albums to a certain extent. I like Jugulator more than I like Demolition, and same thing with X Factor. I've grown to like certain things uh, from X or Virtual 11. I'm sorry. Uh,
Which came first, Jugulator or Demolition?
Jugulator came first.
I like Demolition better.
Really?
Yeah.
Demolition's the second one, and that's the one where I think Glenn Tipton had more input on that one. I think Ripper Owens had very little input from what I've read.
I think that to me, Jugulator was a different side of Priest. It was almost Priest trying to be a little more aggressive and a little more modern metal, and I think it worked pretty well. I really liked that one. I wasn't as crazy about Demolition or
Yeah,
the first one. I wasn't as crazy.
you
I
weren't
wasn't as crazy- yeah,
Jugulator.
Jugulator. Yeah, I wasn't as crazy about. I always
Yeah,
get them mixed up.
yeah. Demolition was more the classic Priest sound, whereas to me,
Yes.
Jugulator was trying to be Fight.
Yeah, I mean, it had that more modern, aggressive sound, and I thought it kind of worked. Uh, Perhaps it didn't work so much as a Judas Priest album, but it worked as an album.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I can't blame them completely because good music is good music,
Yeah,
and unfortunately, fans like you or I that have been part of the scene for so long, it's hard not to judge things based on previous efforts.
yeah.
Um, if when Black Sabbath came back and they did what was that album with where they brought back Dio. It wasn't a
Oh,
Heaven
Dehumanizer.
Dehumanizer. Thank you. When Dehumanizer came out, it there was no way I couldn't compare it to Mob Rules or Heaven and Hell, even though this was Sabbath, kind of heavier and plottier and more kind of slower tempo songs. I liked it, and I still like it to this day. But to me, I have to look at it and go, "This is a different Sabbath." And I'm sure that's what people did when Heaven and Hell came out, and they were fans of the Ozzy era, and
Yeah,
they're thinking of like Sabotage and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or Masters of Reality or Volume 4. Heaven and Hell was a different Sabbath. It was a different band.
now
And
to me, I'll take Dehumanizer over Mob Rules.
really,
Yeah, I like Dehumanizer better. To me, Mob Rules feels almost like they were trying to copy Heaven and Hell to me.
yeah,
Um, and it's just like it feels like, oh, we've heard this before. Um, I don't know. That's sort of the impression I get on it. Um, like there's some songs that are almost carbon copies. You had Children of the Sea and Heaven and Hell, and you got Sign of the Southern Cross or whatever
yeah,
it is. And
yeah. And you've got Neon Nights and Turn Up the Night, and
yeah, I mean it really just felt like they were copying the album kind of, and it doesn't feel very original to me. Whereas Dehumanizer is very it's its own album.
yeah, that's true. But yeah, I've always said this too, and I've because my one friend Steve always says, "How come the bands that we like always had the classic stuff when we were listening to them when we grew up with them?" And part of that, I always say to him is, we were at such a place in our life because I think music becomes classic partially where you are in your life.
That's
I'm
true.
sure there's people that there are fans out there that look at Angels of Retribution or Redeemer of Souls and think, oh, those are classic Priest albums. And it's like, they'll never be classic Priest albums to me. I love them. I listen to them. I think they're great albums. Judas Priest is one of those bands. Whenever they come out with something, I will purchase it. But to me, it's always going to be Hellbent for Leather, and Unleashed in the East, and um, even Point of Entry, which gets overlooked a lot. There was a place that was me in high school and carefree, and music was my life 24/7. And I lived to go to the record shop and go to concerts and listen to music. And, as I got older, unfortunately, other things have had to come into play because, I have a mortgage, I've got bills,
Yeah, yeah.
got things that I have to do. So music has kind of had to take, I don't want to say a back seat because it's still very much, but I would have to say it's in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat.
Well,
So
I think I tend to be different in that some of my favorite albums from some of these bands I've been listening to forever are actually more recent ones.
really,
Like I would put Yes's "Fly From Here" probably in the top five Yes albums of all time. Nostradamus is without, and everybody hates Nostradamus, but for me, that's my all-time favorite Priest album.
wow,
I
that
absolutely
you
love that album.
you are definitely an odd one because that would not be a lot of people's favorite Priest album. And in
No,
fact,
but I've run into quite a few people who say it is actually. So
really,
there are more of us than you might think.
and I do like it. I mean, I get what they were trying to do with it, so I'm like, yeah, it's cool. I like it, but it's always going to probably be hell bent for leather for me. It's just there are things that I still like. Redeemer of Souls. I still like Firepower. Um, UFO, that Conspiracy of Stars album. I love that album, but
Is it the
it'll
cover
never.
album?
What's that?
Is it the cover album?
No, that one's Saltino's Cuts.
Oh, okay, that's right.
The one before it, which was their original studio album. I love that album. I think it's phenomenal. I bought it and I still listen to it to this day. It's never going to replace Obsession, Lights Out, or Wild the Willing and the Innocent, because that's when I was so engulfed in music that's those albums start to finish. I know them like the back of my hand. And for me, Rush, that's a tough one because I got into them at kind of like All the World's a Stage and A Farewell to Kings. That was kind of like when I got into them. But I do love Permanent Waves. I love moving pictures. And I've gotten to love even some of the later day stuff with Counterparts and Snakes and Arrows, I think, is really good. And Clockwork Angels, I love. So,
Now for me, Rush is a different one because for me, the best period of Rush, my favorite album of theirs is A Farewell to Kings, and from 2112 through about Permanent Waves, I think is probably my favorite period of the band.
Yeah, to me, I still go. My favorite period will still include Moving Pictures and Signals.
Although I will say I love Caress of Steel too.
Oh,
And a lot of people hate that one too.
I don't get that one. I mean, if you're a Rush fanatic, there, the Necromancer, Fountain of the Menth, Lakeside Park, Bastille Day. The only one that's I think I'm going bald is kind of like the odd cut on that one.
I kind of like that one just for the lyrics.
It's kind of them showing their fans that they have some sense of humor.
Yeah,
but it's like that one song that just doesn't fit. It's kind of it reminds me a lot of Do You Close Your Eyes on Rainbow Rising.
Oh yeah,
it's a good enough song, but it's like when you look when you look at Starstruck and A Light in the Black and Stargazer and there's a couple of other songs that I'm trying to think of. I can't remember, but it's like those were the songs, and then you've got this like kind of love song. Do you close your eyes when you're making love? It's like it just didn't fit in.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel with like I'm going bald. I never skip it when I'm listening to the album, but it's kind of like the odd track out.
Yeah, I can see that. But yeah, so that's my period probably from Caress of Steel through Permanent Waves, maybe Moving Pictures, but Moving Pictures was different. It was shorter songs and not as proggy, and that was sort of when they started making the shift, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that, and then I think they really completed that shift at Signals, because even on moving pictures, you still had the camera eye.
Right.
You still had some prog stuff on there, but things got shorter songs. You didn't have album length material. And it's
Well, I
funny
guess
that
I
one.
read some interviews with them, and they said that Hemispheres was such a nightmare to make that they
Yeah,
decided they were never going to do anything like that again.
yeah, and I've read stuff later on where they've talked about how they did La Villa Strangiato. They were trying to do that song in one take, and it just didn't work out. And it's odd, you were talking about how your favorite Yes album is one of the newer ones, and how Nostradamus is your favorite Judas Priest. My favorite Yes album, and it's because it wasn't the first Yes album that I got into, but it's the one that I bought. My first Yes album that I actually went to the store and bought was Drama, and that's probably my favorite.
That's up there with me too. I mean, Fly From Here is probably my top five, but my favorite is Close to the Edge. But that was the first one I ever bought, and I hated it when I first heard it.
Really?
Bought it at a garage sale for 25 cents, and I put it on the turntable, listened to it, and thought. I mean, I was 12 years old. I thought, my God, what is this? It's terrible. So I put it away, and maybe 6 months later, I thought, I want to hear this again. I don't know what it was like, but I know I hated it. And I put it on, and I thought, it's not that bad. And so maybe a week later, I put it on again and went, hey, wait a minute, I like this. And it didn't leave my turntable for a month and a half after that.
Yeah. For me, I remember, you know, listening to Fragile. Then my friend John had the Yes album, so I listened to that. And then I remember he pulled out Tales of a Topographic Ocean, and I was just like, yeah, no, this is not going to work for me. Later on, I've learned to appreciate it. But when I first heard it, I was like, there's a lot of meandering going on, and it didn't seem like it made sense. But um, and it does it as background, like if you're just like putting on an album. But if you go and you listen to it intently, I think I kind of get it then.
That's one. Yes Fanatics, a lot of Yes Fanatics love that album. Personally, I think it's got some really great moments, but it also has a lot of stuff that just doesn't really work for me. It seems to me like they could have made it into a single disc and it would have been much better instead of a
Yeah,
double disc. It is not one of my favorites of theirs.
yeah. It's but those were the days of double albums, and I remember their triple album, their live show, Yes shows,
Yes songs. That album is
Yes
awesome.
songs. Yeah, that's yeah, Yes shows was the double album that came out later.
Right.
Yes
That was
songs,
around
yeah.
1980. Yeah.
And I love that album, and the packaging is incredible. And they gave you that little tour book
Oh
that came
yeah.
in it. I was like, this is it. This is the way live albums should be.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. So anyway, you had anything else you'd like to chat about, or you want to think about wrapping it up, or
yeah, I can't think of anything. I mean, I've just, I mean, I guess I wrap it up in a way by saying, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of Music Street Journal. I do enjoy it. I think since I've started, I've had at least one article in every issue
I
since that
think
time.
yeah, I don't think you've missed any issues.
Yeah, I
You
always,
you are one of the most consistent and one of the most helpful writers I've got because if I ask you to do something, you're like, yeah, I could do that. I really appreciate that. It helps a lot.
yeah,
You dig through your collection and find what you can get to help out with the balance of Prague stuff, and it's very helpful. It's very much appreciated.
yeah. And well, it's very much appreciated that you give me an outlet for my written ramblings on music and my live reviews and everything. As I mentioned earlier, I can't imagine, this has been, and I'm not saying that my life is over with or anything like that, but
Right.
I'm saying, this has been such a fun ride, doing all this stuff, getting into music and then being a part of Music Street Journal and being able to meet my idols, interview them, take pictures of them, review their albums. It's been really fun. And you say I'm easy to work with. You're extremely easy to work with too, because I'll say, hey, I've got this idea, or I've got these records, that did you want me to, do a review? And you're like, yeah, sure, sounds good. Bring it, brew them up. And, I always try and make things easier for you as well by picking prog stuff, because I know that's a harder one to kind of get sometimes, because we want to make sure that at least 50% of the issue is prog.
Exactly. And sometimes
So,
that's tough to make, and I wind up having to put aside a lot of stuff. I'm finally down to less than a year uh, backlog, I think.
wow.
Finally.
Yeah, I've really had a good time with it, and I continue to have a good time with it.
Yeah.
I still enjoy it, and I still, and you mentioned it earlier, we've become friends out of it.
Yep.
It's not just, employee and employer. It's I'm friends with you. I send you Christmas cards. I want to know how you're feeling. You were under the weather, and so I'll shoot you an email. Hey, how you feeling? I hope you're better.
Yep.
It's something that my life would be less without it. It's just it's gotten me. Music has always gotten me through a lot of tough times in my life, and it continues to do so. Not that I have a lot of tough times, but music is always something that I've always had that I could count on.
Well, I just say life is a roller coaster. You're always going to have tough times and good
Yeah.
times.
And, doing this stuff for Music Street Journal has always been a pleasure. It's always been a lot of fun. And quite honestly, I'll say it again. I get a kick out of the fact that something that I've written or I've taken a picture of is on something as legitimate as Music Street Journal, and not just some, blog that a housewife came up with. It's legitimate. It's definitely a cool magazine.
Well, yeah, and people can actually buy it in book form.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how many. I don't know if there are any other websites like that.
No, it's there aren't. And I think that's some of the cool stuff, is because you've got reviews and you've got interviews. And these are things that, as long as there's an internet, there'll be Music Street Journal, there'll be something out there. But, and this is and I'll end it at this. This is my problem with streaming services, and why I still actually buy physical copies of DVDs and physical copies of CDs. It's because this is music that I love, and I want to hear it when I want to hear it, and I want to have access to it whenever I want it. And that's not always going to be the case with these streaming services, because, remember when that whole thing happened with Joe Rogan on Spotify, and you had Neil Young and a couple of artists pull their catalog from Spotify. I think since then they brought it back. But let's say you're a Neil Young fan and you're like, oh, I want to listen to, one of his albums, Reactor, on Spotify. Nope, can't do it. It's not on there. Same thing with streaming services. You may be a fan of Friends or Seinfeld, but if that streaming service goes into some sort of contract negotiations and they can't reach an agreement, it's no longer going to be available. Well, I've got the DVDs. I can put it on and I don't have to worry about it.
That's exactly my feeling on it too. I want to have the physical copy, so it doesn't matter. I don't have to depend on someone else continuing to provide it online for me.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the one thing about the cool printed versions of Music Street Journal. You have that, and you can flip through it on a train, on a bus, on your couch. You don't even, if your internet goes down, you still have something to read.
Yeah, if your electricity goes out and you've at least got some light, you can still read it.
Yeah, if it's daytime or a candle or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
It's because we have a backup generator for the whole house. I bought one and put it in because I didn't want to be stuck without power, especially since both my wife and I work from home. And so I also did a battery backup for my internet. So I'm not, worried about the power part, but I've had my internet go down. Power's going, everything, but my internet's,
Right.
AT&T Uverse has gone down for whatever reason. And so you have it in print form, you can read it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Plus, it's collectible that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm come from a generation that I like to physically hold something. I
Me
like
too.
books, I like magazines, I like CDs. I loved albums. How many times I'm sure you did the same thing. You'd open up the album and you would look at the artwork and try and
Oh,
figure
yeah.
out what kind of coded message was in the artwork. And you'd read the lyrics along with the music while it was playing. And, it was an experience listening to music.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you don't get that same thing with streaming. Streaming's, I don't know. It seems more disposable, I guess.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, I think some of that could be that where people's buying habits are disposable now too. But
That's
I'm
true.
glad to see CDs and LPs are starting to make a big comeback.
Yeah, me too. I don't know how long it'll last, but I'll be happy. I'm happy with. One record store day, I was chatting with a guy in line who was probably, I don't know, 20 years old, and he was saying that cassettes were making a big comeback in certain types of music,
Yeah.
which is pretty bizarre, but cool. I still have a cassette deck, and I still have
Yeah.
cassettes. So
So do
yeah.
I. I still have a cassette deck. And I know like the new Metallica album, there's a version of it that you can get on cassette that's like in like a day glow yellow
Oh,
case.
nice.
So they're doing some specialty stuff, which is cool. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I remember one of the record store days that Metallica's No Life to Leather cassette was one of the things that you could
I
purchase.
remember that. Now that you mention it, yeah.
So yeah,
So
well, I'm glad that stuff's happening. And I went to a record store about a month ago, and um, they had a lot of vinyl, and I saw young people put down stacks of vinyl, and some of it was like newer stuff that they were buying on vinyl, and it wasn't cheap. Like the
uh-oh.
one kid, it was like $170 for
Oh yeah.
the stack of albums, but he was happy as can be, and I'm like, yep, I love seeing that.
Me too. Me too. I'm happy to see the music's still alive, so that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, definitely.
Well, I think we will wind it up with that, and
Okay,
call it a night. But why don't you hang on for a minute? I'm going to end the broadcast, and then I'll chat with you for a second or two after that.
sounds good.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and talk to you soon.